Good morning. It's about 7 o'clock in the morning on May 12th, 2022. I haven't done a garden walkthrough in a while, and I haven't done one in the early spring ever maybe, so I wanted to show a few things here while some things are in flower. So I'm just going to kind of walk through an ad lib rather, some narration. So the first thing to see here, this is a Carmine Gumi. That's flowering for the first time this year. It's really nice smelling flowers. It's about 4 feet tall. We just finished about a week ago. The service berries were in full flower. That was a nice sight to see everywhere. Straight ahead of me here, this is the rootstock of a Japanese plum that came back after the top died, the grafted part, and that flowered for the first time this year. So I'm curious to see what that will become, if anything, if it'll make any fruit. So you can see I haven't mowed here yet, but the grass is growing. We've had a very late, cold spring in general, and more rain than normal. So that's been good for things growing. And now it's been hot the last couple of days. This is another rootstock that's growing up and flowering. That is was an apricot tree. Now it's a peach rootstock that it was grafted onto, and it's got about 6 or 8 different trunks. So I'm curious to see if that will fruit this year. It got frosted last year. Over here, there's a little American plum over there that's flowering. This ground cover here is green-headed coneflower, which is edible, and that's doing nicely here. There was wood chip mulch dumped here and shredded leaves years ago, several years in a row, and that's why the soil here is better than most areas. A little grafted pawpaw tree there, just starting to leaf out. Catalpa, coppice, a couple of those here. They've got multiple stems. This tree here is a Quince aromatinea or something. Never have seen fruit on that yet. I think it had a couple flowers last year, so we'll see. Maybe one of these years. This is a hedgerow here that's been replanted in the last 2 years, and you can see again autumn olive right in front of me here is the star grower of any species at this site. There's some Nanking cherries, the medium-sized bushes there. The thing that's not leafed out is a rose of Sharon, a little hazelnut bush here, Nanking cherry, hazelnut, 9-bark, hazelnut, wild rose. So this part was replanted 2 years ago, and you can see nothing has grown up too big in the meantime. There's a little kitty that Jackie calls Ugly Kitty, but sweet, sweet cat. Hope I don't scare her away here. I'm gonna try to walk so I don't get too close. She's kind of semi-feral. So there's another gumi that's flowering right there. Those flowers smell great. Nice plant to have in the landscape. These are some resprouts of American plum. There was a nice American plum tree that had to get moved. It was basically right here. And those flowers smell awesome. We'll see another big grove of that in the back. So here we've got a cultivar. I think that's the yellow-fruited autumn olive there. Little peach tree here grown from seed from Michael and another service berry over there that flowered already. This is a little clove currant I got from Burnt Ridge because my clove currant original one from Trevor was not doing that great, so I wanted to get replacement in case mine died. So here we've got kind of the tail end of flowering on this Harrow Sweet Pear tree. We've got the yellow flowers are Siberian Pea Shrub, and that's kind of in full flower right now. You can see that they're kind of like bean-shaped flowers, or pea. And this is the, I guess you'd call this flowering quince. This is kind of the common quince that you see mostly in people's yards. Nice, pretty red flowers, spreading slowly over time. I've got another similar one you'll see in a minute that's got light pink flowers. Here's a little chestnut tree. Behind that over here is a running type serviceberry from my friend Ray. I'm gonna pan over here. Apple trees in the background there. Nice full flowers, smell great. This tree here is a little leaf linden that I did some pruning on this year because it had a lot of weird kind of crossing branches and things that I thought should be taken out. And it's interesting, this one here leaves out probably several days to a week later than the other one, which is right straight ahead of me there. That one's in pretty much full leaf. But these little leaves, the tender young leaves, are edible. They're when they're kind of transparent like this, they're mild. Tastes kind of like a lettuce, a little bit stronger flavor, but edible in a salad. Under here, the ground cover is Dame's Rocket, which it was just showing up on its own. I didn't plant it, but I like it. This tall tree here is a chestnut that's got a very upright growth habit, like almost too upright. It looks like a pear tree almost. And that's died to the ground a couple times. So I've got a little persimmon planted next to it in case it doesn't make it. I'm gonna pan over this way. So again, you can see the hedgerow here, which is kind of slow to coming in here, but it's going to, maybe this year will be the year it kind of fills out a bit more. That's only 2 years in. I planted that a little bit more densely than the old hedgerow that was there, which was at 6 or 7 foot spacings. That one is about at 4 foot spacings. And the one that I replanted in the back is even closer because that gets less care, and that one's at about 2 or 3 foot spacings. So the tall bush here is a hybrid hazelnut. Has the largest nuts of any of the ones that I grow, but the nuts have a lot of problems, so it's not my favorite one. Next to that is a Nanny Berry, and that's got little flowers forming, but they're not turning white yet. This is a medlar, I think. Haven't ever seen much growth or anything from that. I'm gonna walk over here a bit. I'll show you the flowers on these Nanny Berries. They look kind of like little broccolis almost, but this is a viburnum species. Here we have these serviceberries in the original hedgerow from 2011. So this hedgerow, this remnant that you see here, this was not torn down or messed up during the power line expansion. And so these are all nice bushes that are, you know, kind of at their mature size for the most part. The serviceberries are probably going to keep getting taller, so I may want to prune them down and cut out some of the larger trunks every year so that I can keep the fruit within reach, because now it's kind of getting out of my reach a little bit. The birds like it though. The birds get 99% of it. And you can see in the background, it's red bud season. It's kind of like peak bloom of the red buds. And those are really nice to see around here. They're a very common tree in woodland and yard type landscapes. A couple little things here. This is another little clove currant. Behind that's another, I think that's a carmine gumi. This peach tree here, you can maybe see a couple flowers on that. This thing's about 85% dead. It's had a really rough life, and it's not long for the world. And it's been that way for years. So I planted a replacement for it a few years ago. Here's one of the seed-grown peaches from Michael And. I think that's the white-colored peach. I forget what he calls it, Iowa something, or I don't remember. Nanny Berry behind that. A couple of rodent-planted hazelnuts. There's one back there. There's one right here in front of me. They keep moving hazelnuts around everywhere, which is cool. I'm happy to have more because sometimes I forget to propagate them myself. This tall group here, that's mostly little leaf linden with multiple stems. It got coppiced at some point by a rabbit, I think, and regrew a bunch of stems. The lower thing under that is a meadowsweet spirea, a native spirea, and that's kind of spreading out nicely. So now I'm going to pan over, pardon the mess here by my shed. This is like a propagation and storage area. But these are 3 apple trees that were here. My grandfather planted these. They don't make very good apples, and in most years they don't really have much of a crop, but they're in full flower right now, and it's very nice to be around them. Great smells, attractive trees. I want to show you the ground cover under here, or a couple ground covers. So this is the nicest area of ground cover. Here we've got a lot of ostrich ferns that are filling out the space nicely. This really pretty purple flower here is Woodland Phlox, and it's got one of the nicest scents of anything I've got growing. Super nice. That only grows about a foot tall. And then as we go over here, there used to be more stuff in here, but a lot of it's kind of been lost to competition. We do have a few ramps there that are kind of, maybe the Celandine Poppy should come out because these are, you know, pretty prolific. And then the other purple thing, that's what they call money plant. I forget what the name is, if it's Lunaria or something. There's a white flowered one and a purple flowered one. I've got both around the property. So yeah, the ground cover here is somewhat diverse and it looks nice. Hopefully we don't get a late frost to zap all these ferns. That happens in many years. Over here, different story with the ground cover. We've got nettle, a stinging nettle, which is an excellent green vegetable. Actually, here's a little hazelnut that the mice or something planted for me last year, so I'll dig that up and move it somewhere to grow a little bit bigger and then pot it up and give it away to someone. So yeah, here are stinging nettles, and this was originally only meant to be a portion of this understory, and it's kind of gotten out of control. So I need to eat more of these and propagate more, dig them up and give them away. Here's a volunteer redbud tree, not really growing in the greatest spot. Those just show up everywhere also. So sorry again for the junk everywhere. I should have cleaned up before I did this video. This pond has a leak and it drains itself, so I have to keep refilling it every so often. But I get little frogs and things in there. Here are some plants that are potted up for propagation. Some hazelnuts, some different bramble fruits, some perennial greens, roses, different stuff. That's a hazelnut that was planted by a rodent. This is a nice persimmon tree here. This was actually not a volunteer. It grew through a pot. Be careful when you set pots down and leave them for too long. That's how I got this stupid forsythia here. I have two forsythias that are grown through pots, and I think you can actually still see the pots that they were in, and so those are kind of just here now. And then over here, the same deal. These are all from Arbor Day, like junk plants that the Arbor Day Foundation sends you if you order something from them. So this is some kind of a ornamental crabapple. I think it's got like one flower. This thing gets hammered every year by rabbits and things. They girdle the hell out of it, so it's just barely alive. Another volunteer redbud that I should move before it gets too big. And then this is a new air pruning bed that I built this year. So I've got 3 of these now. I'm gonna back up so you can kind of see them. But these are excellent for growing cuttings and for growing taprooted things like nut trees, pawpaws. Some things grow really extremely well in them. So in this case, I've got some grapes, I've got some elderberries. I got 3 new cultivars of elderberry this year, cuttings. Got some new willows. There's a few Nanking cherries in there, but these were stuck maybe a couple weeks ago, and you can see growth. You know, the elderberries are growing. The willows are really easy. Those are growing. Kind of come down here and see more. But by the end of the season, this should be pretty filled out with green if all goes well. Another hazelnut that I didn't plant, that's getting kind of big. This bed I planted a bunch of persimmon seed into. That's what these wood chips are here. And there's some grape cuttings over there. I had a bunch of Nanking cherries in here that were pulled out. There's just a couple of them still left. Gave those away. Here we've got some very large, let me move some of the junk out of the way here. A couple very large red currant cuttings that I grew from cuttings last year, and they've actually got flowers and are gonna fruit this year. There's a couple elderberry cuttings here that are totally out of control. Need to dig those up and get those to their new homes. Those are from cuttings. Some large size Nanking cherries. These were ones that birds or rodents planted for me underneath the bushes I have at home. I put them in here for 1 year and they grow like 3 or 4 feet tall many times. So that stuff's got to be dug out. I do have some grape cuttings here that I just stuck. And what else? Okay, so I'll keep walking around. I've done some work, you probably can't tell, but the shed here used to be about 10 feet or 12 feet farther this way, and we had to move it because of the power line construction, and they didn't want buildings in there right of way. So again, apologies for the mess here, but so this shed, that new bed is built where the shed kind of used to come out to. So I rebuilt this little building here, or I put walls and a roof on it. It was just a frame up until this spring. And so I've got my lawnmower stored in there right now. And these beds, I've done some work in. I had a lot of, used to be vegetable garden beds, and then that wasn't working out that well. I had another vegetable garden elsewhere, so I wasn't using them much. So my idea was to transition this over to perennial beds. And I planted a bunch of stuff in here, and then I didn't really take care of it all that well for a few years, and it got just overrun with grasses and monarda and other junk, kind of like weedy asters and goldenrod and stuff. So I'm kind of trying to fight back the grasses, and I've filled in most of the paths with wood chips because I realized planting in raised berms doesn't work well in dry sandy soil like this. I probably should have planted in the ditches rather than in the berms. So anyway, I've been plugging in more perennials here. Some of them have weathered the storm. I've got a few honeyberries. There's some currants, things that are flowering. So this is probably like a red currant. There's a honeyberry, and actually these flower for a really long time, probably a month or more. That's an edible blue fruited honeysuckle type of plant. This is one of those red currants that I grew from cuttings last year from Russ's beautiful red currant. I think it's called Perfection. There's a honeyberry. Here's a little willow that I planted, another currant of some kind, and I'm going to come in inside some of this grass and use it as mulch. But this is a tune tree, T-O-O-N, Tuna sinensis, and that has edible leaves, although it has a lot of winter dieback and it's never done that great here. So yeah, just planting more perennials. This is a Taranoki, which is a Japanese Angelica tree. Planted a couple of those here. That's a sort of a spring ephemeral vegetable. You eat the buds of it. Some kind of a currant there. Another honeyberry here that's kind of struggling. There were a lot of different, there's about 15 honeyberries in here at one point, but there's only about half of those that are still alive. Nanking cherry. Turkish rocket here. I've only got a little patch of that I've managed to keep alive, even though it's a weedy, aggressive species for most people. Another currant, honeyberry that's got just like 1 or 2 branches alive. And same here. I think they might have, maybe there's nothing alive on that one, but anyway, I'm trying to fill in, get rid of the grass, and move this over to a more densely planted system of perennials. Put an autumn olive there on the end. Those are good at fighting against grass. I think this is a black currant there that's flowering. Another Nanking cherry. This, I don't think there's anything there. I will walk you over and show you this beautiful Quince Bush, which is kind of at its peak of flowering. Now this, I think, was also just sold as a flowering quince or maybe lemony quince from Oikos, but it's got these really gorgeous flowers that are kind of like light cream color to pink, to medium pink. Really pretty. No scent, unfortunately, but just a beautiful plant. And this one is sending out suckers around it. So you see over here, these are suckers that are coming out, and this Nanny Berry next to it is also suckering. So eventually it'll fill this space out. So I'm going to pan over here. Apologies for the junkyard. This is actually getting cleaned up a little bit, believe it or not. That's not my junk over there, that's somebody else's. So I'm going to pan, do a quick walk around here. Up here is an area of blueberries. I mulched those this year. And if I pan over here, this is the area that's being reforested by itself by birds. So you've got, I think this is the rootstock of an Asian pear that died, and then there's an autumn olive behind it. But really high density of bird planted saplings here. So you've got lots of serviceberry, like this is a little serviceberry. You've got wild apples, wild cherries. This is a serviceberry here. This is about 7 feet tall. And I actually put a tube around a few of these to protect them from browse. But there's one every few inches in some of these spots. So this is a really cool little area. I wish my whole property was like this, but unfortunately you need tree canopy and bird perches for this to happen rapidly like this. This is how it seems to me. Succession was not as quick as I hoped it would be. So I'm gonna pan around. Yeah, these blueberries, I think they're flowering now, or should be flowering about now, but they're not growing that well. Yeah, they don't look like they're really flowering yet. Not too impressive. Again, major grass encroachment. This area over here, excuse me, this is a grove of sassafras, and I've got some pawpaws planted in here. And actually, this is the first year I've had flowering on any of the pawpaws I've planted. Now, who knows if they'll actually amount to anything. They'll probably get zapped by frost or something. But these are the beginnings of pawpaw flowers. They turn like a maroonish, purplish red color later on. Yeah, these are pawpaw flowers. This tree was planted in 2010 or 11. It's only about 8 feet tall, so not amazing growth on that. But actually here it looks like it's got its first suckers. I didn't notice this last year, but this has got to be a sucker from the roots of that pawpaw, so that's cool that they're starting to fill the space out. As we go over here in this other tree tube straight ahead, that's also a pawpaw. This was planted several years later, probably 5-6 years ago, but from nice quality stock I got from Grant Schultz, and that's flowering as well. So I'm not confident that I'll have fruit this year, but at least I've got flowers this year, which is a milestone in this garden. So that's cool. That means one of these years I'm probably gonna have fruit. So this is a wildflower garden here. It's been pretty overrun by sedges of some kind of a sedge, but I don't know. Some things are still hanging on in there. Little redbud tree that I planted. You know, these things flower at a pretty early age. This is only maybe 3 years old. It's got little flowers on it. Here we have a precocious autumnal. This one is flowering sooner than all the other ones around here. And this is growing just to the south of a pawpaw tree here, so it's giving a little bit of shade when it's young. I can chop this and drop the leaves of the autumnal, and that'll help fertilize the pawpaw. So I do have a couple more. That pawpaw back there is flowering, and I think there's one over here that may have a flower or two. I've got about 10 or 12 planted in this area back here. This is a little wildflower garden, shade garden, and it looks like the deer, excuse me, somehow have not been through yet to devastate these Salomon Seal. Usually they start chopping those as soon as they pop up. But Salomon Seal is a beautiful plant for shade. It does have edible shoots in the spring, although I can tell that this plant is weaker overall because these shoots are not very thick or very tall. That's probably because the deer have been eating them for years. But normally they have an almost asparagus-like stalk that you can eat, and it tastes really good. Actually, it's as good as asparagus or better. And then we've got Celandine Poppy is the yellow flowered thing. Sweet Woodruff has got these little white flowers on it. The ramps over here are kind of just fading out for the season. They're a spring ephemeral. We've got some, I don't know if that's early meadow rue there. Columbine, red buds that showed up. We've got mayapple. Quite a little forest here, again, a different view of that. And you've got autumn olives, apples, serviceberries, lots of eastern red cedar. Just a cool mix of stuff. Of course, some poison ivy that comes in with everything. This is my catalpa coppice area, or was going to be. I think it's in too much shade, and I think the plants are too close to each other, so I need to probably take out every other one of those. Gorgeous wild apple back here. Beautiful to see the apples in flower right now. That one I've grafted a couple things onto, but I think it's in too much shade for that to be very productive. We got a couple or three little plums from Oikos here. There's one, and these are growing very slowly. They're barely just still alive. There's two. I have to look at my map to tell you what varieties these were. And here's number three. And actually, this one's got flowers for the first time. And these are only 2 feet tall, maybe. They're just higher than knee height, maybe. So that's very dwarfing so far. I've got some supposedly the American highbush cranberries planted here. That remains to be seen. Got sold the wrong variety 3 or 4 different times. Here we've got some goji berries, some autumn olives doing very well, wild apple, and I've flagged some of these wild apples and pears to graft onto. So this one looks more like a pear, but I've got both. And so those are going to be grafted here any week now. So this property here I don't own. Welch's owns that. Got some oaks. We've got apple, walnuts, different things. And this is south I'm pointing here. So this stuff could eventually shade whatever I'm growing over here. So panning back, looking toward the north. Got a nice thicket here of wild goose plum. Actually, that sprouted out from the roots when one of the large parent tree was spaded out a few years ago. Here's kind of a red-leafed wild apple, although the red color is fading a bit now. It's more green. It was intensely red before. And here too, we've got quite a assortment of. We've got sassafras, we've got apple, we've got serviceberry, eastern red cedars, autumn olives, maple trees, silver maple from what used to be here, box elder, wild cherry. This is a gooseberry I planted years ago. It's got little flowers and little proto fruits on it. Honeysuckle, another pear for grafting there. There's a tulip tree that showed up on its own. I didn't plant that one, although I have planted other ones here. Looks like another pear for grafting over there. This is a plum from Oikos that I planted a couple of years ago. So I'm gonna walk over to the other section. I wonder if I should make this in 2 videos instead of 1, because it's gonna be very long. No editing as usual, but I'll just keep going with it. Hopefully my camera will last. So this area here, all those tree tubes together, that's the chestnut coppice area, which is very slow growing and basically not really working out as hoped. This flowering thing here is the wild goose plum that was spaded out because it was kind of in the way of the construction. It's flowering for the first time really this year. Flowers smell pretty good. They don't smell quite as good as the wild American plum, but beautiful. Just got one up my nostril. So this area here, a lot of chestnuts in here. There's an alder. This is a wild black cherry that came in. I'm kind of limbing some of these things up to give more light and use those things as mulch. White pine, lilac, dead peach tree. I'll show you these little sand cherries are flowering right now. I've only got a few of these plants growing. They should like it here because it's sandy and barren, but they haven't done as well as I would have thought. So these are sand cherries flowering. They've got these kind of wispy branches. The growth habit reminds me a little bit of aronia or something, a lot of stems. This is a false indigo bush. You can see it was regrown from being cut to the ground. This is a cultivar plum tree that's basically dead. Almost every grafted fruit tree I've planted here has been pretty much a failure. So I'm glad I planted a lot of stuff that was not grafted, but just seedling types. A lot of black locust coming in here too from several that I transplanted. So these tall trees here and here, those are black locust, and those have sent out root suckers everywhere. Yeah, they're coming up everywhere, so I can kind of manage those as I want, wherever I want to have stems of stuff and let them grow, and they'll grow pretty fast. Here's a wild serviceberry just finishing. Didn't plant this one. Birds planted it for me, but may get a few fruit this year. This is a grafted, the only grafted chestnut tree that I have. This is from Richard Winkle. Doing okay, you know, comparatively speaking. Chestnuts here have a hard time sometimes. My double tree tube technique to keep the growing tip from getting browsed by deer. It's kind of ugly, but it's basically worked. More chestnut trees. These are probably from Allison originally. Her seedlings are from her parent trees. This is a wild apple that I've grafted onto. It's a crab. And interestingly, I just noticed that it's got a hazelnut bush growing at the base of it. Another one that the rodents would have planted for me. Again, you can kind of see the red buds in the background. This is a chestnut that is done very poorly. This was planted at least 10 years ago. The main trunk always looks like it's about dead. It's got another one growing at the base. I don't know what to do with that. Black locust there in the front. I wonder if I should walk over and show you this grafted apple that I grafted, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. This one is flowering for the first time this year, and I'm excited about that. See if I can remember the name. I think is this Monarch or Paducah? I can't remember. Maybe Monarch. I did a cleft graft, and the graft is almost totally healed over. You can see there, it's got some nice flowers on it. I'll show you the graft. So here's the graft union right there, and just about to close up right there. It's got one little buttonhole type thing. So, you know, this is the rootstock here. Rootstock, rootstock, rootstock. So I'll probably keep pruning that stuff off. But nice, beautiful big flowers on this thing. And I've never seen or tasted the fruit on this, so I'm excited to potentially get to try that this year if all goes well. Here's my neighbor's property. There's some wild apples. You can see in the background those white flowers. Nice looking trees. Over here I did have cornelian cherry flowers this spring. So if we're lucky, we'll see a few cornelian cherry fruits on that one and that one over there. You can see the trails that the deer and other animals leave. They actually make quite a path, and it persists through the seasons. You can see it in the wintertime. You can see it anytime. Mulberries just starting to leaf out here. Autumn olive. Got a nice massive cup plant over there coming in. More chestnuts here. Had a lot of chestnut dieback and regrowth. So some of the chestnuts look pretty ragged. Another chestnut here. Looks like the main stem died at some point. And this is all regrowth crap coming up. I don't know what killed the main stem off, if it was a cold winter or blight or whatever, but I don't know. Here we've got some baby box elders coming in from the parent tree over to my right. I don't mind those. I'm actually going to leave these for a while. Anything that will help turn this from a grassland into a forest is welcome at this point. It can always be managed later for firewood or mulch or whatever. So coming back over here, here's my little test hole for the pond I've got. This just kind of tells me where the water table is at. And right now it's gone down a foot or two from where it was a week or two ago. But we've had a lot of rain this spring. And actually there's a couple of grafted apple trees here. I grafted these last spring. Hopefully I wrote down the variety somewhere because the tags are disappeared or they're not legible, but there and there are some grafted apples, and these are probably growing from rootstock from this wild crab apple. It's suckered out. Here I've got a few sea buckthorns, and I'm trying to baby these a little bit because they don't grow well here at all. So this is one that's doing so-so. It's about half dead. I've got a little one here that I planted. That's from One Green World or Burnt Ridge. That's a small one. This is the one that I've got that's doing the best. Ooh, look at this wild asparagus that came up. This thing is a monster. This is like prime picking. Gotta come back and get that. And there's another one here. Usually the deer get onto that. They have the good nose for it, and so I gotta come back and harvest that. So This sea buckthorn here is a nice one. It's about 4 or 5 feet tall, filling out nicely. Looks pretty healthy. I've been mulching these pretty well. This had one fruit on it last year, and I think maybe this could be a root sucker from that one because I didn't plant one right there. And then I've got a couple other ones here that are kind of pathetic looking. This little one here, I probably had about 12 of these at one time, and I think I've got maybe like 5 or 6 that are still semi-alive. That one's only alive at the very bottom portion, the top's all dead. And then I think this one is maybe totally dead. Yeah. The chestnut coppice area again, almost nothing coming out of the tree tubes. I would call this a failure so far. Autumn olives I planted are doing great, as you can see. I'm going to show you the crazy looking leaf formations of this hickory. I think this is a shell bark hickory from Oikos, planted a long time ago. I think what keeps happening is the deer like to browse the young growth on it, so it's never grown past like 4 feet tall. But it's got really wild looking growth in the spring. Over here, I'll show you, this is a pear I grafted last spring, and it has taken well. You can see the whip and tongue graft right there. And so I've got 2 stems to choose from. I need to prune one of those off so it doesn't have a double trunk. But that's cool to see. That's a rootstock from an old pear tree that was here, and it's sprouted up everywhere. Excuse me. Okay, so the rest of this I'm going to try to kind of speed through because I've already taken up a lot of time. You just missed the service berries flowering, so those are gone, but there were a couple on the edge of the woodland over here. This area here, kind of getting out of chestnuts and into a lot of pecan plantings. This is a pecan here. Those are not really showing much signs of life yet for the year. Just a couple little buds coming out. I may graft onto those eventually, but I think maybe I'll wait another year or 2. So as we walk over here, we've got my champion chestnut tree, my timber chestnut. That's the largest one of any that I've ever planted. It's about, I don't even know how many feet tall that is, 40 feet tall, 30 something. It's a nice straight growth habit. Have a fence around to protect it from deer rubbing. But the trunk on this thing is massive. Put my hand up to it. You can see, it's a good 5-6 inch diameter, probably. Over here we've got old stand of mulberries that are kind of dying out. Most of the fruit production has dropped on those, not too great anymore. This is a multi-trunked chestnut tree that had some nuts on it last year for the first time. This is a multi-trunked chinkapin chestnut tree, and that had nuts 2 or 3 years ago, but not last year for some reason. And over here we've got some different, those are Seguin chestnut trees. They're not really showing much life yet. This is an aronia bush here. Deer and rabbits like to browse these, so they have not grown very well. They also like wetter soil probably. Yeah, this just a little bit of growth on this chestnut. This is an oak that I didn't plant, but is growing really nicely here. That almost looks like a chestnut leaf oak. Beautiful tree. I'll keep it here for a while. It's got nice kind of rugged, shaggy bark. There's my outhouse that I rebuilt last year. Nice to finally have the outhouse back in action. Over here, beautiful trees, but kind of useless. These are cherry rootstock that regrew. I guess the grafted parts died, and I planted these 10, 11 years ago. And so what these are, it's a Maleb cherry, and the flowers smell great. Very nice smell, kind of an almondy smell. But yeah, it's just the rootstock, and so the cherries they produce are these little things that are not really edible and don't taste good. Birds like them and they spread them around. I think it's this semi-invasive species here. So panning around, this is all winged sumac, not showing much signs of life yet for the year. This is a wild apple tree I've grafted onto this right-hand side branch as something I grafted on. Beautiful flowers though. I hate to even cut that main trunk down, but I'd like to focus the energy into the grafted part at some point. Over here, this is a pawpaw patch area that I remulched it last fall, so I'll show you here. This is about as large as any of them are. This is a pawpaw. A couple flowers here and there, but I don't expect to get fruit on this yet this year. This is another pawpaw here, another decent sized one. No flower buds on that, maybe in a year or two. So behind that, these are some black locusts that I grew from seed. Let me pan over this way. Here's this is another cherry rootstock that is growing. It's probably the same Malib cherry as the ones we just saw. Yeah, it doesn't really have much smell. So outhouse, wild rose. I should probably cut that down because it's the, what do they call it? Multiflora rose, not really the ideal species to have. I do have some nice wild native roses here. This is an apple that I grafted last summer, and again, trying to protect it from the deer a bit. That was a wild seedling that came in, and I grafted something onto it. This is an Asian pear rootstock, and I could graft onto this too, or I was kind of hoping that it would flower and see what the fruit amounted to, if anything, but even at this size tree, it's probably 10 feet tall at least. No fruit yet, no flowers. Autumn olive, one of the earlier flowering types. Not really smelling it, so I think the flowers are just about to open. There's a lilac behind it. It's one of the first years that's flowered actually. That was probably planted 10 years ago, but you know, it's a tough life out here in these barrens. So panning around, we got a 9-bark bush here. I planted that. Once the deer finally let it grow, you know, they used to keep it as a topiary by browsing it. Another chestnut coppice area, another mostly failure, I would say. Just stuff is just not growing very well. I even planted at 3-foot spacings. You know, most of them are not out of their tree tubes. So panning over here, catalpa. Don't remember, I think I planted that. I like catalpa trees, so can never have too many. You can always cut them down later. They make good fence posts, and they're just cool, attractive trees. That's a wild serviceberry. I think the birds planted that, and I just put a guard around it to keep it. White birch that I planted, some evergreens that I planted, white pine here. That's some kind of a spruce, I think, over there. Nice screen of eastern red cedar there, but I probably should cut every other one down because they're going to be shading each other out. That's a north-south row, but it's a perfect screen right at this moment in time. White pine with the dead top, so it's gonna have a weird shape. White birch there again. There's a lot of wild asparagus back here, so I may encounter more than what we just saw. Sorry for the noisy birds. This is a thicket of wild American plum, and you can see it's just finishing off its flowering right now. But about 5 days ago, this was just amazing. The smell of it was incredible. One of the best smells in the world, and just so much insect life that you can't believe it. Another white birch there. Sorry. That's a couple of plums that I've planted over here and here, trying to get pollination for this thicket here. Sorry for the glare. Autumn, or hazelnuts there ahead of us. Autumn olive behind that. I'll walk over to my kind of oak and persimmon area here. Some autumn olives. So this stuff here, all that to the right, left, I'm sorry, is basically American persimmon with a few other things mixed in. This whole central area here is my oak savanna idea, although I think I'm gonna change the plan on that a bit and plant more densely, plant more shrubs in here and some other trees too, because it's taken a long time for the oak savanna to manifest itself. This oak here is probably 12-15 feet tall. That was planted 2011 or 12. So some of it's growing okay. So this is a dead asparagus stalk. You know, when you see these, then you would look for the new ones coming up. So I don't see one there, but I'm sure we might see another one or two because there's a lot of asparagus right in this little area for some reason. There's another oak I planted same year, 2012 probably. And there's one there. There's probably half a dozen of them, or 8 in this area. So the idea was to kind of keep this open as a savanna with a lot of sunlight, but I think I'm just gonna fill it in more because it's too slow and I don't like grass much. And we don't have burns here. So yeah. This is a wild black cherry, letting that grow for a while, but at some point that'll get cut down and maybe let it regrow. This is a service berry that I had spaded from the front. It was doomed from the power line construction. And that flowering thing right there is the American plum from the way in the front. That, you know, to act as a pollination partner for this grove here. That's a Ponderosa pine that I planted. It looks like it's almost totally dead. I don't know what's going on with that, but it doesn't look great. This area I planted some new hazelnuts in, and where you see the little white flags, I'm going to plant more chestnuts back here. Again, I like chestnuts better than I like acorns, so my oak savanna idea is getting modified a bit. And if you walk around at certain times of year, you notice things like that white flower stuff over there. That's got to be some kind of a wild apple growing in that wood, that line of trees there. So I didn't notice that before. Probably nothing remarkable in the fruit, but still good to know that there's an apple there. Could be grafted onto or worth checking out later. This is a really nice oak I planted in 2012. I have to go read the tag to tell you what it is. But this one's got kind of a strange growth habits, kind of leaning. Bergamble. Okay, that's what I was going to guess, but I didn't want to guess wrong on camera. So yeah, that's the nicest of all the oaks I've planted so far. I've planted some Korean nut pines over here, but they didn't really do well. I think there's only one that's still alive. That's just a wild, I think that's not a jack pine. Red pine, or what's the other one? Scots pine. I think it's the Scots pine. So this is some kind of a fir or maybe spruce that I planted. Be the season to harvest spruce tips. You know, you can take these and put them in sugar, make different drinks and things out of them. They have a nice flavor. So these areas with the white flags here with the mulch, I pre-mulched those last year. Sorry for the focus. Come on. Those are going to have new chestnut trees. I'm getting 20 more chestnut trees from Grant Schultz from good parent trees, and those are going to be back here. So the edge of my property, the southern edge, is where this fence is. Here's a wild crab apple that I've grafted onto, but interestingly, there's no flowering this year, just on this one little end branch. And this is probably not the part that I grafted. Nice smell. But so yeah, I might have to wait another year to see if I ever get fruit off of that. But the growth is looking good. So now I'm gonna pan around and walk back to the front. Sorry for the long ass video. So this will be the eastern edge of my site up here. The corner is kind of where that pile of crap is, and then we're looking down here. So everything like from here over I don't own. That's owned by Welch's. So this is my replanted hedgerow. It's doing pretty well. Planted about roughly 2 foot, well, I think they're like 4 foot spacings, but it's staggered, so it's 2 rows, so it's basically every 2 feet. There's something. So it's mostly a mix of hazelnuts, improved hazelnuts. There's a wild rose, red osier dogwood, Nanking cherry, Nanny Berry. There's service berries in here. There's some autumn olives. So this, I think in a year or two, this is going to be filled out pretty well. Rose of Sharon, 9-bark, autumn olive. It's basically the same stuff that just repeats over and over. There's not a lot of, it's probably eight species or so. So yeah, I think that's well on its way. It's been mulched pretty well. I'm not going to baby it too much. If we get an extremely dry summer, I might come back and water it a couple times. But in general, you know, it was mulched well enough and the density is high enough that I think it will kind of tough out on its own. So over here, so this is kind of the persimmon area. And I did a lot of mulching in here this spring because I like persimmons and they're really not growing very well. So I wanted to kind of help them along a bit. So I put a lot of wood chips down, put some sheet mulches down here and there. They're just kind of starting to leaf out now. So here's one of the nicer ones back here. None of these back here have flowered yet. There's a couple that I had spaded out, and those haven't even flowered yet either, but I've got some that are probably 8 or 9 feet tall. The nicest ones I've got back here, the one I just touched was one, and then there's one there that's pretty good. This is a serviceberry that I planted, and it's got little fruits on it, so maybe in a month or so we'll see some fruit. Just, yeah, more mulch. So just to the left of that pine tree, that one's about 8 or 9 feet tall. Hoping for flowers on that this year, but there's no guarantee. Wild black cherry, that'll get cut down at some point. You know, all these trees that show up, I'm happy to have them just to fill the space out in the interim. There's a few, I guess they would be called butter hearts or buart nuts, hybrid between the Japanese heart nut and a butternut. I think there's only 4 of those that survived, but they're growing in this area here too. Several hazelnuts, and then, sorry for the bad camera work. So along here, all these tubes that I'm on my left, those are all hazelnuts that I planted last year. Here are some older hazelnuts I planted. So this is going to be a lot of hazelnuts, but I'm also going to fill in with some other shrubs to have kind of a dual hedgerow on either side of this laneway here. In this lane, I'm maintaining it open and mowed for the power company access, and actually they're doing some work right now. I don't know, it's taking a while for them to do whatever they're going to do, but I think they're going to string up another wire or something to do with communications. So they might tread through here and mess some things up again this season. But things are looking better and greener. I've got the grass to come back here. It was all torn up 2 years ago and really super compacted. I've loosened up the soil a little bit and put mulch down and it's filled up some holes. So I think that's about it. Sorry, this is a really long video, but I thought it'd be nice in the morning. It's supposed to be really hot today to show some things and see it this time of year, which is kind of unusual for my garden tours. Actually, things still look green and nice. If we get a droughty, hot summer, things will start to look crispy. So I wanted to show some of the spring flowers. I probably could have done one a week ago and shown you different spring flowers, but this will have to do for now. So thanks for watching if you stayed the whole time, and come take a tour sometime. All right, thanks, bye.